Good morning, and welcome to the National Association for Fixed Annuity webcast. I'm Chuck DiVincenzo, President and CEO of NAPA, and this is our lucky 13th webinar in our series presented during the COVID-19 crisis. We've been hoping to bring you timely information to our membership and the industry as these unprecedented times transform how we continue to successfully modify our businesses. And today we're pleased to have the author and TEDx speaker, Shawn Rhodes. Shawn has leveraged his former life as a war correspondent to become an international expert in how the best teams pivot when change enters their plans. He's a Tampa-based TEDx speaker, and his work studying teams in more than 24 countries, some of the most dangerous places on the planet, have been published in news outlets around the world, including Time, CNN, NBC, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and Inc. His clients have included Deloitte, ConAgra, Coca-Cola, and dozens of similar businesses. Shawn is also a nationally syndicated column with the business journals and author of a new book, Pivot Point, Turning a Dime Without Sacrificing Results. It's our pleasure today to welcome Shawn. Thank you for joining us today, Shawn.
That's my pleasure, Chuck. Thanks for having me. We're going to definitely make this interactive. So this is our first opportunity to do it. If you're one of our attendees, and I see we've got upwards of 70 of us today coming on live, so I'm glad that this topic resonated so well with everybody. I want you to open up your GoToWebinar platform menu here. Go into the chat window, and I would like you to answer one question for me. Do you think the ships in the photo that you're looking at, in case you're tuning in via phone and you're not with us, on livecast, there's a bunch of ships that have been beached. Okay, so that's what you're looking at. It's not an optical illusion. This is the aftermath of a hurricane, but I want you to type into the chat window, do you think these ships were at port, or do you think they were out in the water when that storm hit? Go ahead and type it in the chat window now, and Janet and Chuck, who are my very skilled moderators today, are going to make sure that we push those comments through to me. And they're going to do that either verbally or via the chat window itself by sharing them. So do you think storm happened here? Would you think the ships were in port? Type in port if you think it was in port. If you think they were out in the water, type in water. And Janet and Chuck, what are the majority of the comments seem to be coming through on?
The majority think they were out in the water.
Really, out in the water? Interesting. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So this is the aftermath of a hurricane. This is a U.S. Coast Guard photo. They took this one aerially, of course. And come to find out, a good portion of these ships were actually tied up into port. How we know they were tied up into port is because you can see the way that they're all lined up, and that's how they were beached. So when water and waves push stuff forward, if things are kind of just scattered around the ocean, they don't tend to line up so neatly, but it does happen occasionally. Now, I think we all remember that great movie from the 1990s, Forrest Gump, and Forrest Gump started his shrimping empire because he was out on the water when the hurricane blew through Louisiana and it wrecked all the other shrimping boats. And so all of a sudden, all the shrimp were his, right? And then Bubba Gump Shrimp Co. was founded. Great story, great movie. The reason this is important for today's presentation is in the fixed annuities industry, if you at this moment are deciding that you are going to continue to keep your ship tied into port, and this is the ship of our businesses, the ship of our, just getting out there, reaching out to prospects, making sure clients have what they need. If we're deciding that we're just going to weather the storm of COVID-19, it's essentially tying our ship up into port in the middle of a storm. And while it may be scarier to be out there in the water, more unknowns factor in. The port's safe, we got security to land. It's scary to be out in the water, but it's the people that are out in the water right now that are actually finding ways to innovate solutions for themselves, their businesses, and their clients. And we're going to get into exactly what that looks like as far as a process goes today. So I know you wouldn't be here with us. We're pushing more than 80 live attendees right now, which is an awesome turnout. You wouldn't be here with us if you decided that you were just going to shut down shop and not do much of anything until the whole world resumed whatever new normal was. You're here today because you want to figure out what can we do to pivot in the middle of this crisis. That's exactly what we're here to talk about. So I've been very fortunate, as you heard Chuck mention, to get to study large organizations all over the planet and small teams and entrepreneurs to figure out who was really creating what we're all referring to now as a pivot point in their lives, in their businesses, in their teamwork, and in their organizations. And that's what we're here to talk about. Now, if you'd have heard this presentation from me early January of this year, it would have been about how do we prepare to pivot for the inevitable changes that come, and specifically to the fixed annuity industry in y'all's case. Well, guess what? The COVID-19 virus has kind of changed that, because whatever plans we might have had in early January, whatever metrics we might have set for ourselves in our businesses, however much return we thought we were going to be able to make our clients, hey, all of that went dark. COVID-19 hit, and our business has changed, our lives changed personally and professionally. Now, fortunately, we are in an industry that is still very, very safe, very, very secure, and I'm going to share with you some great ways to begin communicating that in a new way today. But still, the lives of our clients were thrown into an upheaval. Their retirement plans outside of the annuity, placements that they had with us, of course, thrown into upheaval. And so our work now is to pivot our business models in an active way, and that comes from looking at the things that are within our control and the things that aren't. Once we understand what the difference between those two are as it applies to us as business people, whether we are captive agents or free agents, then we can begin to do things that will allow us to pivot and in turn help our clients with their investments as well. And so I bring this photo forward. This is a photo of me, Shawn Rhodes. I was about 17 years old here. And this is critical to the presentation we're going to hear today, because I'm going to encourage you to get out in front of communication. So that means that not waiting for things to come back to you from your clients before you communicate them first. And the reason I bring this photo forward, and you'll see it if you're catching us on the video, I'm waving my mouse, my cursor around what I'm wearing on my feet, which are Birkenstock sandals, okay? Slightly embarrassing to get caught up to this about 20 years after the fact, but here we are. And so what I'd like you to do in the chat window, if you've ever owned a pair of Birkenstock sandals, or if you've ever made fun of someone in Birkenstock sandals, I'd like you to say yes. Just go ahead and type in yes into the chat window. And Janet and Chuck, let me know if we're getting good feedback there. Most people in the world fit into either of those two buckets, by the way. So I should see a lot of yeses begin to come through.
I think the majority of your audience did wear Birkenstocks.
Really? Okay, very
Or
nice.
made fun of them.
Or made fun of them. That's true. It could be either one.
Or made fun of them.
In the audiences that I get to share with, usually we'll have people to say, yes, I have made fun of everyone I've ever seen in a pair of Birkenstock sandals, and that'll come in from a certain part of the country, and then we'll have folks from more liberal parts of the country, traditionally anyway, and they'll say, well, I happen to be wearing a pair of Birkenstock sandals right now, so we get the whole mix. It's great to see it. So again, we're going to talk about getting in front of communication today. You can do that visually. You can do it with virtual chats, phone calls, a lot of different ways. But I show you this photo to let you know a little bit about the journey that I've had. And I'm not going to dwell on this very long, because I think that the value that we can get for moving forward from here is going to be a lot more interesting than the life story that I have. But as I share with you the things I'm going to share with you today, it might help you to understand a little bit about where those things came from. And so this young man, 17 years old, I embarked on an interesting little life journey that took me from being that slightly overweight kid in Birkenstock sandals with a shaggy haircut to being a war correspondent in one of the most elite organizations on the planet. So the Marine Corps took one look at me, the Birkenstock wearing hippie, basically, and said, Shawn, you might never survive being in the infantry. And so we've got another job for you that's probably going to be a better fit. They gave me a camera, trained me as a rifleman, as all Marines are, and then they set me loose studying high-performing teams in all of the branches of the U.S. military. So I was able to embed with Marine Corps units, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Air Force pararescuemen, all of the elite forces that we have in the United States. And I know we might have some international folks catching us live or on the recording, but I was able to study all of those teams in times of crisis. Now, I'll pause here, and I would love to know if we have anybody on the chat right now that is a veteran of any branch of the U.S. Armed Services or any of the international armed services, or you've ever been the spouse of one of those people. Go ahead and type in yes into the chat window right now. We do this live usually by asking people to stand, but hey, virtual format's a new world. So Chuck and Janet, if you would, let me know if any of the folks are typing in yes. Feel free to call them out by name if you're comfortable doing so that we can recognize the veterans and those that have supported veterans in the past. And I know with close
Looks
to
like we
100
have
attendees,
Larry.
we got a couple. Larry?
Yeah, it looks
Sure,
like we had
sure.
Larry. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Patrick.
Patrick, thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, wonderful,
We have a
wonderful. Well, yeah, I know we got more, right? And I always love to recognize them. Usually, I ask if there are any Marines in the crowd. And the reason I do that is because I always keep a box, at least in these live presentations, when I'm able to do this from a keynote stage, I keep a box of non-toxic Crayolas next to me on the stage. And that way, if any of the Marines get hungry in the middle of the talk, I can hand those out because Marines are a very special group of people, as I'm sure anybody that's gotten to meet us in the past knows. It's always a big joke with Marines. We always take it with good humor. But long story short, the crises that I was sent out in the world to study, how teams were operating in the midst of a world of upheaval, basically. This wasn't done inside of an academic setting. And so there are a lot of people out there that are able to share, hey, what have great teams done in the past because I got my MBA and this is what we studied. I was never a really great student in school. And so my classroom was a battlefield. I was able to capture footage like the footage that you're looking at right now of what these teams were doing in order to pivot in times of crisis. Now, they define crisis a little differently than we do. Their crises were life or death. It was, we need to send 30 young men and women into a house and we don't expect all of them to come back. So when they do all come back, we want to know what went right in that situation. What can we study so that we can bring more people back home? And we realized that the exact things that these men and women were doing in more than 24 countries that I was sent around the world to study these folks in was able to be applied inside of organizations as well. When we began looking at what Fortune 100 companies, like some of the clients, if some of our captive agents here, some of the companies you probably work for, some of the ones we've been able to study, and discover that, hey, the things that the military was doing are being used in those organizations as well in order to pivot in times of crisis. So when we look at what COVID-19 has shown us in the fixed annuity industry, it's how unprepared many annuity providers and agents were for crisis and change. And this is both internally and externally. And what do I mean by that? Well, internally, inside of our organizations, very few of our companies, if we're captive agents, had plans for what happens when we're never allowed to meet with people in person again. How do we continue to communicate with our prospects and get them onboarded as clients? And for our existing clients, how do we communicate with them in a world where for the last 30 years we've been able to take them out for coffee or lunch to have those monthly or quarterly check-ins? So that's externally and internally, right? So this has really thrown the business model that we had into disarray. In addition to that, it's also accelerated the adoption of geographically separated employees and virtual sales. And so if we were able to, bring everybody live on video, it would really be a cacophony of people because we have close to 100 folks attending with us live right now. And I asked you, how many of us have had to conduct virtual meetings with prospects now? I'd probably get most of hands up for the folks of us, that are refusing to tie our boat up into port right now. And this is a new model. Before, we had ways to be able to read people if we were sitting with them person to person. If you crossed your legs, I could try to mirror that. If I saw that you were playing on your phone, I could tell I wasn't engaging with you. Well, these days, we're virtual now. So if a prospect is not on the phone, not on the computer, you might want to wonder actually how you're meeting with them. And we'll talk a little bit today about how to approach sales in a slightly different way in a virtual format that'll hopefully help us out. But this is really what it's shown us across the industry right now as it applies to fixed annuities. And of course, many more things have come to light as well, like, hey, worldwide, more than 4 billion people have been confined to their homes. Markets, both domestically and internationally, are in disarray right now. And people are looking for security now more than ever. They're looking for it personally, they're looking for it emotionally, they're looking for it financially. And that puts us in the world of fixed annuities in a really unique place that didn't exist before COVID-19. So if we can pivot right now, we can take advantage of that in a way that our peers that are deciding that they're going to tie their boats up into the storm, essentially sticking their heads in the sand, they're not going to be able to really capitalize on what's going on right now. But we have the ability to, because of what we sell, because of the industry we're in, to offer people something that they're desperately seeking on multiple levels as humans. And that's going to mean our sales potentially could be a lot easier than they were before if we learn how to actually approach that in a way that's not sleazy, it's not taking advantage of the situation, it's actually offering value, which is all we're going to be talking about today. How do we do that both for ourselves and for our clients? So what does this mean for us as agents? Because I know the majority of us today, we either are agents or we represent agents, we lead them. Well, we cannot wait for state and local reopenings to take action. I'd never advocate that you go against any kind of a local ordinance, state ordinance, or county ordinance. I don't want you to break the law at all. But what I do know is that the organizations that are pivoting right now, they're able to continue making profit in the midst of a crisis. They're building plans that don't depend on what happens a week from now or 2 weeks from now. So plans that we can execute given what we're faced with today. And that's critical. And that's what the next point is. We can actually build contingency plans for multiple scenarios so that if those scenarios happen, we have a couple of steps that will lead us forward. We have a flashlight in a dark room for ourselves and for our clients. We can get in front of communication with our clients in ways that we weren't able to before, and it's going to be critical, in fact, for one maintaining them, especially when they're experiencing financial hardship, when they're experiencing layoffs and furloughs. And we also have the ability to plan for what to do in the short and long term for ourselves, for our business models, and of course, for the value that we're offering into the market. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So whether you are an agent, whether you're captive or freelance, or whether you are supervising such agents, this is going to be really applicable for you, and hopefully you'll get a lot of value. So here's the kind of overview of what we're going to be talking about. Profitability in crisis, both for ourselves and our clients. We're going to talk about establishing contingency plans for ourselves, because a lot of us as free agents, if that's the moniker you would give to yourself, we're basically solopreneurs. So it's up to us to establish how many prospects we reach out to. We have the ability to draw from a couple of different agencies for the fixed annuity plans that we offer. We're going to be talking about establishing communication protocols. What can we do to help our clients and get out in front of any communication issues to let them know this is still a secure way for you to invest your funds. This is still a great way to plan for your retirement. The world is in uncertainty, the markets are in uncertainty, but fixed annuities, still a solid bet. What can we begin doing today to do that in a way that is not sleazy, not trying to take advantage of them or the situation? Because that's something we'll talk about. A lot of people are making the mistake of trying to provide value, to talk about how safe and effective their product, service, or environment is. Restaurants are famous for this right now, and people are really asking the question, so you're sanitizing your kitchen now, huh? Well, why weren't you doing that before? And that's the danger that comes in not really paying attention to how we communicate in crisis. So we don't want to burn bridges when we're actually trying to build them. And we'll finally talk about establishing plans for what we can control. So let's dive into this, so make sure you get a lot of great takeaways before the end of our time together. In the chat window, this is an interactive session if you can't tell, I would like you to type in if you are from the great state of Texas. Go ahead and give me a yes, because I've got a special question for you as it applies to this man. If you're one of the close to 100 people joining us live today and you're from the great state of Texas, go ahead and type in yes. Almost 100 people and no Texans. That surprises me, because Texans are usually the most vocal of the group. In these live sessions I do, when I ask that question, I'm hearing in the back of the room, even if it's 500 people, woo, Texas. So, Texas are very, very proud. All right, so we don't have any Texans, no worries. Type in the name of this man if you know who he is, his first or last name. The fellow with the eye patch whose picture's on the screen right now. And for my veterans, if you don't know who this is, you need to look him up, because he's a pretty famous veteran. Are we getting any feedback there, Chuck or Janet? I know it's a pop quiz. You didn't expect to do this early in the morning, so that's all right, no worries. This guy's name is Dan.
Nobody's taking a stab at who he is.
That's okay. It's okay. No wrong answers here. And as we continue to roll into, sorry, what's that?
Congressman something. Can't think of
He's a congressman. Right? Yep, he's a congressman. Very good, very good. And by all means, y'all, for all of the folks that are attending with us, if you have a question you'd like me to specifically address, pop it in the chat window. All right, this is an interactive format. So if you want me to dive deeper, Shawn, how do I do that in this situation? Please let us know. So this fellow's name, Dan Crenshaw, he's in the U.S. House of Representatives from the great state of Texas. I'm not a citizen of Texas, so I can't claim that it's mine. But this guy's famous. One, he's a U.S. representative. That makes someone famous enough in this day and age. But what makes him probably more unique is that he's a former Navy SEAL. And so the movies that we see, all the guys popping out of the water, with the face paint and the ghillie suits and all that stuff, he was one of them before he became a U.S. congressman. He decided that his life wasn't dangerous enough. He was going to go to the Beltway. Fair enough. All right, that's his choice. The reason that I bring his photo up is he's got an amazing quote that really applies to us in the fixed annuity industry today. And his quote is that failure becomes inevitable the moment it is embraced as a possibility. All right, so write that down on a sticky note, emblazon it on your office wall. Failure becomes inevitable the moment it is embraced as a possibility. This is critical in a time of crisis because so many of us look for all of the reasons that we might fail, that we won't hit our numbers, that we won't be able to reach out to folks as we had planned to in the early stages of this year. So many different things that we had planned for ourselves are now off the table as options. Well, that really brings up the possibility, hey, we might not make it through this. I may have to go look for a different gig. I may have to go do something else. Take Dan's words to heart, that failure becomes inevitable only when we embrace it as a possibility. So what I'm about to show you now are ways to embrace possibilities outside of failure. Because in Dan's world, failure meant somebody wasn't going home from his team or even himself. And those are the men and women that I was able to study all around the world. The reason that failure was never a contingency is because it meant pretty much the worst outcome possible. And so they were always looking for ways, even in crisis, even when everything was going wrong, what can we control? What can we kind of have agency for in our own minds and in our own businesses so that we can at least get out of this, if not innovate and come ahead of where we were before? And I would love it if everybody on this chat came out, further ahead than where you were at the beginning of this year. Might take a little while to do, but it's completely possible. And I know there's at least one of the close to 100 people on this call that's going to have better numbers going into Q3 than they had anticipated going into Q1. That's absolutely within the realm of possibility. And I know that a lot of us are striving for that right now. So how do we do it? Well, I need you to take a look at what your priorities, what your goals, and what your initiatives were for yourselves and your own organization, whether you manage agents or whether you're a free agent. What was all of that at the beginning of Q1? And then I need you to understand that if we're going to move forward in crisis, if we're going to pivot with what we're all dealing with right now, with uncertain reopenings that might revert back to down here in Florida, we have like phase 1 where we're all pretty much in lockdown. Phase 2, it's starting to open up. That may go back and forth for a while, no matter where we are in the country. And so we need to understand that, hey, what was our plan in January of this year is not a viable plan anymore. It doesn't mean that we wipe it off and set it on fire. It just means you need to put that on the shelf for a minute. And we need to start building plans from where we're at now with the resources we have, with the ability to meet in person or in limited numbers or just straight virtually. We have to take a look at what we're dealing with today in order to begin to build a plan forward for how we succeed. And how we do that is by taking a look at what's actually essential for us. Now, the reason I can't give you an answer to what's essential is because everybody's operating in a different locale, a different environment. You have different sales goals for yourself. You have different client contacts for yourself as far as goals. How many people am I going to reach out to this week, month, or year? How many products am I going to sell in a certain line? And we each have those goals for ourselves, and it's going to be unique. But we have to take a look right now at what is absolutely essential for us to achieve success. And again, success, we have to define that for ourselves as well. For some of us, if we sell just a couple of products in the course of a certain period of time, hey, that's success. Some of us have more ambitious goals, or we're leading a team and we have to manage more than just one person. That's fine, but we have to really carve it all back and say, if we look at just what's essential right now, what does that look like for us? What does it look like for us as far as retaining personnel, client contacts, number of products that we sell, whether we're reaching out to people, past clients, previous clients, future clients? What does that all look like right now for us if we just carve it back to what's essential? And I want you to start there, because if we don't have a baseline goal, then it's going to be impossible for us to define what does above and beyond look like. What does bonus look like? And I want everybody to strive for above and beyond and bonus, but if we don't know what the baseline is, we'll never be able to know if we have achieved above and beyond for ourselves and our numbers. So what this looks like for ourselves, and everything that I'm about to share with you, by the way, is a great exercise to walk your clients through. That's why I say we need to know our and our clients' runway. And when I start this off, I'd love to know if any of the close to 100 people we have on the live feed right now, if you have a pilot's license. So if you can legally get in a plane in your own state and take off a runway. Go ahead and type in yes. Do we have any pilots in the room?
Doesn't appear we have, oh, wait a minute,
Nope.
Larry.
Larry.
Larry's a flight instructor.
Really great. Congratulations, Larry. All right. So if Larry could share this with you, he would share something along these lines when we talk about how important runways are and the markers on the runways. So before a pilot takes off in an airplane, he has to factor in, or she has to factor in, a lot of different things. The size of the airframe, the weight of the airframe, how many passengers, what's in the cargo hold, ambient weather conditions, the length of the runway, all factor in to when they have to make a critical decision of, do we lift wheels off of this thing, or do we keep this on the ground and take another circle back? Now, why that's so critical is because if they make the wrong decision, if they're still on the runway and they don't have enough time to pull the plane up based upon weight and weather and everything else, they might end up crashing into a mountain. And that's obviously not the outcome anybody's looking for. And so for us, with our own business models, with the own goals that we have or that we've been given if we're captive agents, and for our clients as well, because every one of those folks that we service, they thought they were going to retire at a certain point. They were putting away X amount of dollars every single month so that they could actually fund that annuity. Well, we need to figure out, given the fact that our world has changed, that we are all in a state of crisis, whether that's a big crisis or a little crisis right now, we need to know, how far can we go before we crash? How far can we go before we really have to stare failure in the face? And the reason we have to ask that question now is we don't want to get to that delineating point on the runway and be too far along, going too fast to be able to pull the plane up, okay? So we need to understand for ourselves, and this is a great conversation to have with your clients, especially if you want to open up that two-way communication channel, figure out where can you provide more value and service to your clients. Let's have an honest chat, Bob or Susan or whatever their names are. From what's happened in the world, the fact you've been furloughed, or the fact you've been laid off, or the fact that your business has changed, you're not going to hit your commission numbers, whatever unique situation each of our clients are in, let's have an honest chat about how far this can be sustained. Because I want to be there to help you in any way, shape, or form. I want to leverage my network. I want to give you information about the CARES Act or the new HEROES Act that's halfway through Congress right now. Whatever you can provide to them, but you can't provide value, unique value, to any of your clients unless you know exactly where they are. When I've been in communication with NAFA for a couple of years now, but I had to understand exactly where most of the industry was at in order to put this presentation together. Because if I'd have just launched it cold, both Chuck and Janet would have kicked me off probably in the first couple of minutes, because it wouldn't have looked proper. I had to understand what was going on in the industry before I could offer customized, unique value. And each of us has to be able to do that for our clients and for ourselves, because each of us has goals. And we know if we don't meet them in a certain amount of time, well, negative things are going to happen to our performance reviews or to our employment if we're captive agents. So how far before we crash? Critical question to understand. And that's going to be unique to everybody on the call right now. Second question we need to ask is, hey, what do we do if we get that far down the runway? And so Larry could tell you there's a couple of things a pilot does when he realizes he's going too fast but hasn't gotten wheels up yet. All right, well, we need to understand for ourselves, what do we do if we hit that point? And if we don't ask that question ahead of time, then we'll be forced to operate in a reactive mode, both for ourselves, our own businesses, for our agencies, or our clients. All right, they might find themselves in that position as well. And this is a great conversation to be able to have, to figure out what other lines can we offer these folks, what resources in their community that we have that we can connect them with. And I'm sure most of us, we've been in the game long enough to know what we sell is only part of the value that we can offer our clients. Our network, our connections, the church that we attend, the grocery store we shop at, whatever that might look like. There's tons of different ways we can provide value that will keep a client on board with us, even in a challenging time, that'll make them really consider hard, do we quit funding that annuity or not, if we can provide more value. And that's a great question to be able to walk them through. How far is it before we really crash here? And you can figure out to replace that term with whatever really applies in your situation. Crash is kind of a negative word, but I use it because it evokes a very strong visual image for us in business. And of course, what do we do if we get that far? So let's really dig into the second question, because that's the one that's going to be valuable for us to be able to walk through in a time of crisis and fixed annuities. And of course, for our clients as well, because each of them is in a state of crisis, no matter what industry or business they're in. So let's talk about dealing with that runway. Now, again, if you're walking a client through this, you can model this exactly. And by the way, these slides are going to be made available to you, so don't worry about taking furious notes. We're going to get the PDF out. But I want you to walk yourself Okay, especially if you are a free agent and you deal with multiple lines, multiple companies, and you're basically a solopreneur or an entrepreneur. Maybe you manage a team, or if you're in the case of, hey, I'm a captive agent, but I need to figure out how do I do this with my clients. Great 6-part process I'm about to walk you through. The first thing I want you to do is define what's essential. Define that for yourself, your goals as an agent, but also to help your clients define that. Walk them through, be a little bit of a financial planner. And again, full discrepancy, even if you don't have that title, you can still have a conversation about finances. You might not be able to recommend certain things unless they're within the realm of what you're licensed to sell, but that's all right. Have an honest conversation. And then if you can't offer it, find somebody in your network that can, if you know that's going to be the best fit for them. But define what essential is for yourself and your clients. Second, I want you to help yourself and your clients assess the threats that might stand in the way of reaching that essential goal. Now, I hesitate to use the word survival as a goal because that's pretty negative and that's like real bare bones. Nobody just wants to survive, that's pretty low on Maslow's hierarchy, but we can at least define what's essential and then look at what are the things that could stand in the way of that. So I may be employed part-time now, but what if I'm furloughed full-time? That's a conversation a lot of us are having with our clients right now. Well, how's that going to affect my ability to contribute to my retirement fund, to my financial plan, to my annuity? All right, well, let's walk through that now. What happens if you're furloughed? Assess those threats ahead of time for yourself and for your clients, and that's really going to be a great way to provide value. You may not have all the answers to that question, but being able to identify a threat is the first step, right? We all watched G.I. Joe as a kid. At least I may be aging myself there in the generation that did, but the big phrase in G.I. Joe was, hey, the more you know, all right? That's critical to dealing with crisis. Once you assess threats, and again, you can do this internally and externally, what threats could stand in the way of me meeting my goals this year as an agent? Or, hey, my client, inventory the resources you have. And again, resources are not just the lines that you're licensed to sell or that you have the ability to sell. It could also look like community resources. It could look like people you know. It could look like the ability to network someone in or connect them with a bank that's really doing a great job of getting those Paycheck Protection Program loans out. Whatever that might look like for you. But inventory the resources that you have available that could address any of those threats. You do this, and I'm not giving you anything, by the way, that only works in a time of crisis. This critical formula that I'm giving you used in times of bull markets as well by top performers in any financial industry. And so you can definitely use it outside of crisis. So this could be a career-long guiding program for you if you want it to be. Next thing I want you to do is capture experience. Now what this looks like, I'll use it internally first. So how does this apply to me in the financial industry and specifically the annuity market? This is not the first time that the markets have dealt with crisis. We go back to 2008, 2009, there was a dip there. We go back to 2011, there was a dip there. I want you to look into your network. Maybe you were around back then, which is great. You have a lot of history in the market, but let's take a look back at what people in our industry were doing in times of financial crisis in the past, in times when the market tanked. There are things we can learn. Now, obviously, we're not dealing with the exact same circumstance. It wasn't a pandemic that we were dealing with. It didn't force people into their homes, but there's a lot of similarities we could draw, especially with folks that pivoted at that time. What did they begin doing differently? Now, I know NAFA at that time was dealing with a lot of forced regulations that were trying to get passed up in the Beltway, and they were real advocates for making sure that stuff didn't get pressed down back in 2008, 2009, and in 2011. Well, that's one way the entire industry had to pivot. We had to make sure that we were still allowed to operate as we were before. But look into the people in your network, if you weren't around back then, or even if you were and you just want different perspective. What did agents do back then in order to pivot in times of crisis? And if we capture that experience, there's something we can learn from it that we can apply to the way that we do business today, the way that we interact with our clients today. And for your clients to walk them through this process, ask them, what did you do back in 2008, 2009, in 2011, the last time you were laid off, the last time you were furloughed, if that's ever happened to them before, help them walk through a game plan. One, it'll really ease their minds emotionally because when you're laid off, it doesn't matter how many times that's happened to you, that's a stressful experience. When you're furloughed, your pay is cut, you're asked to take a reduction, whatever that looks like, that's a stressful time, even if you've experienced it before. Walk your clients through this process of being able to figure out, all right, when did something like it happen before? What did you do then? And what could we learn from that we could begin applying today? That'll be a valuable conversation that'll add value to your clients' lives. Next thing, and again, this is internally and externally, as agents and then as a service we can offer, just as a way to communicate, as a way to add value. I'm not advising you do anything illegal. Don't offer anything you're not licensed to offer, all right? But outline what the courses of action are going to be from here. We've defined what essential looks like for ourselves and our clients. We've assessed the things that could stand in the way. We've looked at the resources we have available. We've captured the experience. When has something like this happened in the past? What did we learn? Now, what can we do with all this information? What do we do first, second, third, fourth, and fifth? That's something that we can walk ourselves through. And if you manage agents, great time to build a plan for them based upon all this data. And if you're dealing with multiple agents, or you are a captive agent and you've got a parent company that kind of handles a lot of the HR administrative planning for you, encourage them to walk through this with the team setting. All right. Very, very few people find greatest success in doing this by themselves, because we can only see, so close to the glass. And being able to peel back requires that we actually engage our team in this, or our peers. If you have some folks that you're in a mastermind with, great exercise to walk through if you're all in a similar industry. And finally, we're going to plan for contingencies. And so what this looks like, we're going to dive into. What does it look like if we hit the end of our runway, we get that far, and we have a choice of, pivoting right now or crashing into the mountain? I don't want you to crash into the mountain. That's failure. That's what Dan Crenshaw was saying only becomes possible, or if we embrace it as a possibility. We're going to look at ways to actually build plans so that we don't end up crashing. Now, again, reiterate, hey, this is an interactive experience for everybody here. You've made the time to be here with us today. I want to make sure that I answer specific questions. If you have them throughout the course of what we're talking about, throw them into the chat window, and Chuck and Jenna will make sure that we address them. So 2 questions to ask ourselves as solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, or to have our leaders ask us, as if we're captive agents, if we fall into that category. If we have to achieve that metric of survival or what's essential by a certain date, all right, and that's the critical thing on a runway, when is that going to happen? All right, is it going to happen in June, July, August? If we continue at our current pace, current amount of products sold, whatever that looks like, what does that timeline look like for our runway? If we hit it by that time with the resources we have, just the resources we have, we've got Zoom, we've got a Rolodex, I'm aging myself again, we have a phone book, I'm aging myself again, I gotta stop doing that. You got an email account. All right, let's bring it into modern terms. You got all this stuff available to you, just the resources we have. But if we have to achieve that essential goal, that survival goal by that time, how do we get it done? Map out that essential plan with just what we have available. So that's the first thing to do. And again, that 6-part process I just gave you is going to be critical to that. Second thing I want you to try to do is, if we have to achieve that goal, and I'm getting a little feedback here because working from home is fun, as I know we're all used to. If we have to achieve that goal by that time, July, August, September, or even 2021, whatever that looks like for you, but if we had unlimited resources, how would we accomplish that? Why is that a valuable question? Let's say that you are the brand new recipient of a $500,000 deposit into your business model. All right, so your agency gets that, you get that, you get that loan come through, the HEROES Act delivers higher than we ever could have expected, whatever that looks like for you. But now you've got unlimited resources to meet your goal. How would you get it done? Now, again, unlimited resources doesn't mean that the world changes. You're still dealing in a COVID-19 world, but if you had unlimited resources to meet your goals, how would you get it done? And the reason this is a valuable question is it opens up what they call a blue sky method of thinking. So if you might say, Shawn, if I had unlimited resources, I wouldn't be worried about, make a number, so that would be good, all right? But I still had to deal with virtual settings. Well, if I had unlimited resources, I would upgrade my computer, because I'm using this webcam that I had to steal from my son or my daughter, and it's not very good quality. I'd get a new mic set up. I'd set up a home office that looked like I was a professional, didn't look like I was operating out of my basement with a single, fluorescent bulb, dangling from the ceiling. Start thinking about those things. And while you may not be able to execute on the whole idea of the brand new $10,000 home studio setup, maybe that would encourage you to say, well, what if I could do something about that dangly light that makes it look like I'm like Ted Bundy in Silence of the Lambs or something, whatever that might look like for you. That blue sky method of thinking is going to give you insight into things you can execute on that's really going to make a difference for your business model and for your ability to be successful with your clients. And again, both of those questions, great questions to walk your clients through as well, especially those of them that are getting closer to retirement, because I know for them, their retirement accounts are getting hit outside of what they have in fixed annuities. So what do we do about contingency plans? Well, this starts with assessing threats. What are the threats that we've identified? And that's why it was red when I gave you that 6-part layout. What are the threats that we've identified that could stand in the way of us achieving our goals? Well, first, let's bucket them, all right? Because the threats fall into one of 2 categories. Most people assume that all threats are outside of their control. That's incorrect. And I know it's incorrect because if a Navy SEAL or a US Marine or a Green Beret recognizes that not all threats are outside of their control, and they're dealing with like bullets firing at them, we can do this inside of fixed annuities. All right, I have full faith. So controllable threats and uncontrollable threats. So I did just a very simple mind map of these. You could probably come up with a lot more that are very specific to your industry and that are unique to your business model. But a controllable threat is if my prospects won't meet me in person anymore. That's a controllable threat, believe it or not. And we know it's controllable because there's something we can do about it. And so as you look at your threats, all the threats that you've identified and that you can help your prospects identify for their financial planning, for their retirement plan, ask yourself, is there anything that I or we can do to eliminate or mitigate that threat? We may not be able to get rid of it, but could we lessen its impact in some way? Well, if my prospects refuse to meet in person, I can lessen that impact by inviting them on a Zoom call, inviting them on a GoToWebinar chat, inviting them to pick up the phone, right? There's a lot of different things we can do if somebody refuses to meet in person. But there are also uncontrollable threats we're dealing with, and these are where contingency plans really come into effect. What are some uncontrollable threats that we're dealing with out there? Well, one are the index swings, all right? As much as we would love to be able to do this, we cannot control what the S&P 500 chooses to do on any single day. Boy, would I love to have the ability to control that. Even for a day, I could retire. All right, that's a separate conversation. And I'm sure some of you are like, I'm going to get Shawn's number because I got something. He needs to get into some fixed annuities that I got lines on. All right, that's cool. We can have that conversation. But index swings, definitely something that we cannot control, but we have the ability to develop contingency plans around them. Next thing we can't control is the layoff or furloughs of our clients. Now, this is something that's probably going to be unique to us, but I'd be willing to bet if I were to ask how many of our clients are having their annuity payments automatically withdrawn so that they never see it, probably be a fair amount of us. It's been a popular way to do it. I know it has been happening to my paycheck for probably as long as I've been working. I just don't see the money as it leaves. That way I don't ever miss it, but I know it's slowly and surely funding my retirement. Well, if I get laid off or I get furloughed and suddenly the money stops coming in, that's going to affect my retirement planning. That's affecting our clients' retirement planning right now. We can't control what another company decides to do with our clients, but we can develop a contingency plan for how we respond to that as agents. And we can definitely help our clients walk through how do we build a contingency so they can continue to be successful? How do they meet the bare minimum funding of their annuities? Or if we have to pause, I know nobody wants that, but if we have to pause, how long does that last so we can get them back on track as quickly as possible? If we don't take the time to map those plans out now, all we can do when we pick up the phone and check in on that longtime client and they tell us, hey, I'm sorry, I've been laid off, I don't have any money, all we can do is say, well, sorry, yeah, that sucks. I don't want you to have that response because that offers no value to your clients. And I know a lot of us have inadvertently fallen into that conversation. And so let's build plans for ourselves and at least map out a basic plan that we can then pass on to our folks so that we can get them in a better place as quickly as possible. So what does a contingency plan look like? All right, well, first you have to have an external threat. So Larry, the pilot among us, he could tell us the external thing that gets me to respond to an engine flame out is I look over and I see my engine is on fire. That's the trigger. Once I know my engine of my aircraft is on fire, then I can figure out what needs to happen to either land the plane, eject, or whatever happens, the other contingency plans you might have for an engine flame out. Each of us needs to identify those things for those threats that we can't control right now. And again, if it's a controllable threat, we can do things right now to take action on it. An uncontrollable threat, a contingency, is something that we have to wait for in the future. And again, the end of the runway, we don't meet sales goals by X date. We know that's going to really cause issues for us performance-wise or really threaten our employment if we're captive agents. That date is a contingency plan. All right, so July 1st, August 1st, whatever it looks like. So let's just walk through a very simple model that you can use. And so let's say that there's a furlough or a layoff among our clients. All right, and let's say that by July 1st, 2020, that's when this contingency comes into effect. So if we're not taking the time to check in on all of our clients on at least a monthly basis right now, boy, we better get on that. All right, so that's, if you take no value away out of this, and we'll talk about communication here in a minute as well, you can't over communicate with your folks right now. Now, you might not want to use the same communication channel every single day. Don't give them a phone call every day. That borders on stalking. Okay, don't do that. But I know we've all gotten these messages from CEOs of companies that we did business with like 10 years ago. Like I never thought the CEO of Starbucks would send me an email, but I know I got one, and I bet a lot of us did as well if we were on their mailing list. They're letting us know, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing about the situation, here's how you can help, so on and so forth. We can begin doing that for our clients as well, no matter how large or small our client list is. And so let's say that our client is laid off as of July 1st, 2020, or we have any client that's laid off July 1st, 2020. Hopefully we have more than one client. Well, we need to know the answer to two questions. How will we know this is in effect? Okay, who is going to let who know by when and how? Very simple questions that we need answers to. So if our client is laid off, we're not probably going to know that unless they choose to pick up the phone, or we find out because we're doing our normal outreach, checking in on them. How's your family? How's everything going? Just letting you know, markets are crazy right now, but you invested in one of the safest products out there. Here's where it's at, so on and so forth, right? Typical conversation flow you might have. But we need to ask, is there anything about your employment situation that, I can help with? Can I connect you with anybody in my network on LinkedIn? Like, you should be asking those questions anyway, but that's the course of it coming out. Hey, sorry, I hate to share this news with you because I've had to share it with my family. I got furloughed, I got laid off, right? That's how we know it's in effect. But then what do we do with that information? Well, if we're captive agents, we should be reporting that up, because if we're not leveraging our boss's network, our agency's network, we really need to start doing that, all right? Because that's how we retain clients, by offering more value than just the product or service that we're selling. So it's imperative that we figure out who needs to know this. Bob, my client, my longtime client, had one of our highest selling lines. He was investing a lot in it. He got laid off. I need to let my boss know if I'm a captive agent, let my supervisor know, what can we do for Bob, all right? And they may have resources and the ability to access options that we don't at whatever level of the agency that we're at. That's why it's imperative that we pass that up the chain. Second question we need to do, and this is any contingency for you or your client walking them through this process, what are the first three things we need to do if that happens? All right, so if if a whole group of my clients is laid off as of July 1st, 2020, I'm gonna let my boss know by the next day as soon as I find out, by email. That's who knows by when and how, all right? And then what are the first three things that I need to do? If I'm an agent, the first three things might look like, I need to contact my boss, need to make sure I'm connected with that client on LinkedIn, and I need to find out if there's anybody in my network that might be able to use them in a part-time capacity, right? Whatever that might look like for you. Just be a good networker in just this very simple scenario. But you could map contingency plans for anything that is actually outside of your control. Market swings, you could do the same thing. All right, as far as just communication plans, we can't control what the S&P does, but we definitely can control reaching out to folks and letting them know your money's still safe. So let's talk about communication and actually getting ahead of it. Why I would show you that picture of me in Birkenstock sandals when we began. I'm going to encourage everybody, and this is more than 400 industries, we're finding this is working more often than not, over communicating right now. And here's how that looks. Things we're doing to ensure safety. So again, a restaurant should not be telling people, hey, we're doing a great job of cleaning the floors in here, because it's like, well, didn't you clean the floors before? But in our industry, that might look like either from our agency, and I know a lot of our agencies are producing these kind of press releases right now. We're encouraging all of our agents to meet remotely. We're encouraging this and that in order to make sure that we keep ourselves and our clients safe. Make sure you're sharing that. Here are the things that we've done, that we've changed in order to ensure the safety of everybody involved in our business model. Clients, supervisors, and myself as the agent. Second thing is reiterate the security of our products. So every time you reach out is an opportunity to let people know a lot of stuff is up in the air in the world right now, but you've invested in one of the safest things out there. Keep doing that, because that's what's going to get them to want to tell their friends and family, hey, that Roth 401k that you had involved in that index fund, it tanked like 20% over the last couple of weeks. I'm in an annuity, and my agent just shared with me that this is the loss that we've taken, and it's like a fraction of that, or not at all. That's what's going to get them to want to start sharing, to get that prospect funnel. And you can still grow your prospect funnel even in a time of crisis, but it's reiterating the security every chance you get in every way that you can. And then finally, and you'll see this as well coming across multiple industries, honesty about any logistics issues that happen. Now, if we're meeting with everybody virtually, a logistics issue might look like something that's outside of our control. It's administrative. It's with the company that's actually owning the annuity product that we're selling. But if anything, if any hiccup, if any wrinkle happens in what definition of great customer service and smooth process looks like, get ahead of that and communicate it with your client. In a time of crisis, every small mistake that is made, whether it's our fault or not, is magnified to enormous proportion, because everybody's in a state of stress, right? Everybody is. And so what I might have been able to overlook before, like you being a day late on getting whatever document back to me that you promised was, January this year might have been like, that's cool, we're all busy, I'm busy, it's all good. But if you promise me, hey, May 20th is when I'm gonna get that to you, and May 20th comes and I'm counting on this thing to save my retirement plan, now I'm in an ultra state of crisis, you've just threatened the relationship, I might be looking for another provider, okay? And so that's why get out front of any logistical issues, any customer service issues that might occur. Pick up the phone, get on the Zoom call, whatever that looks like, just to let them know we're still taking care of you. You know, it's outside the control of myself right now. We're dealing with this. I'm riding them hard, like you know, I'm a bringing you know, rodeo rider right now. I'm going to make sure we get what we need, Mr. and Miss Client. Just to let you know, it's going to be a day late. And now your client can rest easy, okay? Because right now, ultra state of crisis for a lot of our folks, especially as it applies to their finances and their retirement funds, which a lot of them have seen drastically reduce over the last couple of weeks. So you might not know who this guy is because he's not wearing his name tag in the photo. You know, it's not in the image. But his name is Stanley McChrystal, another general we were able to study under. Now, Stanley McChrystal is famous because he went through the very same thing that a lot of our agencies are going through right now. In 2011, he was in charge of a couple of thousand of special operators. He was in charge of the Special Operations Command of the United States military. So Twin Towers hit. He was then responsible for taking a geographically centric workforce. Everybody, you know, worked out of the same office or got to see each other fairly often. And he had to push them out all over the world when we began deploying them to fight terrorism in a new way. And so what that means as far as it applies to us in this industry, we all might have had an office that we used to check in at or work out of. Now we're pushed out to our homes. So Stanley McChrystal had a couple of very interesting questions that he encouraged his leaders to ask, and that I'll encourage you to ask of your leaders if you're a captive agent, or hey, if you have clients, this is another great thing to pass on to them, that allowed him to be able to define what does good management and leadership look like in a crisis environment. And so again, great questions to ask of your leaders, of yourselves, and of your clients. And this is how we establish what needs to happen next. Ask them these three things. What do we need to change right now? And again, I'm going to walk you through each one of these, but if I was going to ask my leaders this, it would say, all right, you know, leaders, what do you think we need to change right now in the way that I'm doing business as an agent? Do I need to do more outreach? Do I need to do it in a different way? If you're a leader, ask these of your agents. Agents, what do we need to change right now? Okay. If you're asking this of your clients, it's client, Mr. or Miss Client, what do we need to change right now in the way that we're providing information, the way that we're communicating with you, you know, the statements that you're getting, what's happening in the market right now, what do we need to change? And this is an excuse, if you will, to reach out to every one of your clients if you haven't done it already this month, okay? Second question, what do my managers need to know? So if I'm asking this of my client, to go back to that scenario, it's, you know, appreciate that feedback, Susan or Bob. What do my managers need to know about me as an agent, about the performance I'm giving you? You know, what can I pass on to them that needs to change? Because maybe you don't have the ability to, you know, have the fancy camera laptop set up and do the virtual whatevers, right? If my managers, you know, get a request from enough clients, suddenly that resource appears. It's funny the way business works like that. Client needs tend to make stuff appear. But it could also go up to, hey, what do my managers need to know about the situation I'm in? All right, the ability that I have now to meet with X number of prospects via Zoom. So many prospects don't want to meet with Zoom. A couple of them don't even have computers. What do my managers need to know about what's going on right now in my world as an agent? And then finally, what do my teammates need to receive or hear from their leaders? So if you're a leader of a couple of agents, or if you manage them, okay, what do my teammates need to hear and receive from their leaders? That's a question that goes down to the agents. All right, so that's a little more specific, hard to ask that of a client, but you could definitely encourage it. But if you're in an organization of any shape or size, what do my teammates need to receive or hear from their leaders? Ask them that. You'll be surprised at the feedback you get. But every answer you get to any one of those three questions helps you establish what needs to happen next to pivot in this time of crisis. Not asking these questions means we can only operate with what we know as individuals, and there's no reason any of us should be in that group. That's why we're actually part of NAFA, isn't it? So we can be tied into that larger network of people that are providing the same value as we are. So I always like to build in a couple of minutes for Q&A. So I'm gonna turn it over to that, just open Q&A, but there's a conversation that we want to have, all right? There's a conversation we don't want to have. The conversation I don't want to have, we'll start there, is if I get to meet you at one of NAFA's events in the future, whether I'm a speaker or whether I'm wandering the halls, The conversation I don't want to have is, hey, Shawn, you remember that webinar that you did for us back in May of 2020? Boy, I really should have asked you this question because, man, my numbers were hurting. I almost lost my licensure because I didn't follow this regular, whatever question that, you wanted to have back then. I don't want to have that conversation with you in 2020, 2021, 2022. I'll have it with you if you're buying the drinks, but I really don't want to have it. The conversation I want to have is, hey, Shawn, what do I do if? What should I do with my agents in this situation? Or here's where we're at. Here's the resources we have. What would you advise that we do? That's the conversation I want to have. So that's my direct email address. That's my direct phone line. You don't have to pass through an assistant or anything. It rings right to my cell phone, which is in my pocket right now. It's always good to know where those things are. Yeah, it rings right through to it. So I want to have that conversation with you. And I've built in time in my schedule to do it. Might have to arrange a Zoom chat or something, but we will make it happen. All right. No charge to you. I'm doing this of value to all of us because, hey, I want y'all to be in business next year because I want NAPA to be more successful than it ever has been, so that we can all get back together in 2021 or whatever that new future looks like. So with that, I'll turn it over to Janet and Chuck, answer any questions we have, or I know you all have some great information to share about what's coming up in the future for all of your members.
Yeah, Shawn, one quick one is how have you kind of accumulated and looked at best practices and then get them out to whatever network you're working with?
Great question. So actually, while we're on the screen, here's what I'll do. I will pull up a slide that addresses that. It's always tough to know exactly what everybody needs, but if you have that specific question, I have that specific answer. So let me dig it up. There's a very simple format to use every single week that actually captures these things on behalf of your teams, okay? And so I want to make sure that I address this in the form of a slide, because why not? So here we go. I'll share my screen again. Okay, it's called the Rule of 5. This can be done virtually and it can be done in person, but here's how it works. I want you to meet with your people, whether that looks like a weekly meeting or it should not be more than bi-weekly if you have a team, okay? But in order to gather best practices, I don't allow anybody to show up in my company for our weekly meetings without bringing me at least 5 challenges they ran into, all right? And if I have a team of 4 or 5, some of the challenges are going to be repeats. John, we couldn't get access to whatever software platform to quote so-and-so client X price or whatever. That's okay. Multiple problems, coming in the same week are fine, but you have to show up with 5, all right? And the reason for that is I want to capture what's going on with my team. I want to know you had a challenge with X, and you may be solving that problem. So if you solve the problem on the fly and you still want to bring that challenge to the meeting, hey, that's good to go. I love that, because now I have a solution ready-made. We don't have to brainstorm what the likely solution might be. But over the course of time, what happens, and this is a really, really interesting effect that happens inside of an organization, is if you improve just 5 things a week inside of your team, solve 5 problems, put new processes into place, figure out how they get access to the passwords they need on time, whatever that looks like for you, just solve the small problems they're having. That compounds week over week in performance. So if I solve 5 problems this week, I'm 5% more effective. And some of the problems you solve are going to boost the performance of your teams a lot more than 5%, by the way. But if I just solve 5 problems, next week I solve 5 more problems, that begins a compounding effect that you'll see expressed in this graph. And what I actually build this graph as part of my keynote presentations. If I start at 100% effectiveness, which is saying a lot of our agencies, I understand that, but let's say we're at 100% today, 5% better this week, 5% better the next week, that compounds on itself to equal something like 1,200% performance improvement over just the course of a year. Now that's simple math on just a 5% a week increase that compounds mathematically. What's even more interesting is that the organizations that use that process, the Rule of 5, we can track their revenues on this exact same line. Now, in my mind, that's proof in the pudding, because you can improve 5% and nothing happens, and that's great. But if your revenue tracks on that exact same sphere, hey, that's success right there. And so hopefully that's a way to at least gather them. Now, how you push them out is you have to have systems in place. And so what that looks like is we discovered that, between 3 and 4 p.m., the software platform we use to generate quotes gets overloaded. So what does that look like as a system? You have to get your quote requests in by 2 p.m., right? And that's just a new process that now gets pushed out to your team. But that way you avoid that problem, because you can't fix the system or the problem if you don't own the server, but you can definitely help your people navigate around it. And that gets pushed out as a process change. So hopefully that answers that question. And, I actually give whole presentations on just this thing, so we could dig a lot deeper. But for what you were asking, Chuck, I think that might answer the question. So with that,
No,
yeah.
I really appreciate that. That's great. So go ahead.
Yeah, great, sir. So with that, happy to pull the original deck back up. And then I know you've got some great things to pass on to the rest of you folks about upcoming programming, right?
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Shawn, so much for that information today. Very informative, and obviously, hopefully a new look for folks as they start to view and go out, like you said, instead of focusing on the issues at hand that may be inevitable in terms of not succeeding. We just focus on succeeding. So the webinar was recorded and will be available for those who could not attend today and those wanting to review the content on our website. As Shawn mentioned, he's going to have the slides available if you'd like them. He also had his email and phone number up there. Please take advantage of that. I know he'd really appreciate that. Our next webcast is scheduled this Thursday, May 21st in the afternoon, when our guests from Canex and Pacific Life will take a look at how fixed annuity products have changed in response to COVID-19 and a really in-depth look at how we're going to look at products in the future. If you're not an NAFA member and like to support our education and advocacy initiatives and support the annuity industry, as well as obtain our archived presentations, please go on to NAFA.com and click on membership to join NAFA. Shawn, again, thank you so much for today, and I appreciate your time as well as our audience's time. This concludes our webcast.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.